Right, welcome to Lensafarian Cherch, January 12th, I believe, chronological time. Welcome, and thank you. I wanted to start this video out just to thank people who have subscribed. I haven't been active in asking for subscriptions, just figuring out what the heck I'm doing on here and what I'm adding as far as entertainment in the world. What are we entertaining? What are we looking at? So welcome to Lensafarian Cherch. This is I guess it's just a process to see, within the process, to see what is entertaining, what is meaningful to people. And I've been very much living over the last few years of not having a lot of stuff on my calendar and being much more spontaneous. And it's just in the recent times started thinking about kind of plucking some ideas into chronological time and figuring out, how that feels. And so having something like Sundays at 10 o'clock my time to have something where we can interact. And that's my biggest hope, is that this ends up turning into more of a live discussion and not just me speaking, because just had a very great walk with Chelsea and two other fine souls yesterday, and it was a fresh, what we call a fresh bread conversation, and we were able. I'm hanging out with people that can explore the universe from many different perspectives. People that aren't stuck in the personal and can see above that. So it just allows for the conversation to go in so many different ways. And that's what this is all about. And figuring out what I'm doing. Like, what am I offering to the world now? And when it was so clear before, when I felt like it was so clear before, and I'll probably speak about that a little bit. But first thing I wanted to do is just let's get us centered into this experience. Let's just take a moment, and what we're going to do is just explore now, checking in with ourselves. Close your eyes. We're just going to take a moment to bring ourselves present into this new experience. Let's open up. The idea of this today is elsewhere, looking for elsewhere. This mysterious place that we don't know exactly what we're going to see when we get there. Well, ready ourselves for that so we can tangibly feel inside of ourselves, of our emotional recognition on, is our mind going crazy? Are we working our to-do lists? What do we want to experience? And we can make all these choices for ourselves. Bring that in. Taking my advice from yesterday, breathing in before I speak. Breathe before I speak. Not thinking before I speak, but breathing before I speak. And welcome to everybody. If you're new here, hello. And if you've been around and you're kind of dipping your toe in and figuring out what this is all about as we're figuring it out, it's wonderful. Chelsea's here with me. She might join, she might not join. Hopefully we got the technical stuff working out okay and you guys can hear me okay. Please let us know in the chat if we can change something in the future, because we'll work on the technical stuff. I used to be an over-preparer, and now I feel a little bit like I'm an under-preparer, so I'm finding that balance within myself and calibrating to that. So what is Lensafarian Cherch? Lensafarian Cherch, the idea is to explore different perspectives under the guise of perspective. And that's what Lensafarian, what it responds to is that we can just shift the lens that we perceive and have a different experience. And what that looks like is that I'm a perception. I'm perceiving reality, and then I have my perspective on the things that I believe about this reality, and how I see this reality. And this has shifted immensely over my life, where as I'm very much expanding, or that's what it feels like, that when we come into this reality, there's two things really. There's what we're conscious of, and then what we're unconscious of. And when I went on a conscious path, it was like that's when I really dug in and said, whatever I'm unconscious of, I want to bring that to being conscious. I want to have that as consciousness. So that's what I figured out, was that if how I'm perceiving the world, the perception of the world, is my gift. And came to understand that life is the gift of experience. Once I got out of the what we call paradigm A, or the ego verse, the personal, started to realize that behind all of that was an experience, and that I can shift my perspective that goes into my perception of the world, and then I can have a better experience. And it's basically how you see things is how they will reside within you. And in Lensafarianism, we're peering down the idea of good sensations, and that's our offering. But I was recognizing, like, I had a yearning to be a teacher. And when I look back on it, and I actually did it, I taught in public schools for 8 years, and then I've done some little higher level teaching. But what I recognized, it was never about like teaching kids their times tables. That stuff was not interesting to me at all. What was interesting to me was sparking inspiration in kids to learn. So some of the finest feedback that I got, I remember one student that I had, one of my first years of teaching fourth grade. The mother came back the next year and just thanked me, and she said, "You instilled in her a love of reading." And I was like, now that really hit me. I was like, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be an inspiration for learning. And so it feels like if you're entertaining people, that you have to learn it first. And so like I just was always kind of in that mentality, is I need to be an expert on something that I can go and teach it to people. And that's really shifting, and it's really shifting in this video and this experience, just from the conversation that I had yesterday, talking about the fact that we're always just in the process. There's not a place to get to. We're always just in a process. And so paradigm B was an introduction to, there's just another way that we can experience the world. Like the mainstream perception, the news, the ego verse, identities clashing, all of that stuff fits under one paradigm. And that's the thing, is we're not saying that there's anything wrong with that paradigm. It's just that there's this other paradigm where we can experience this reality from a bigger perspective. And there's a gazillion different ways that people have taught people how to get out of paradigm A to get into paradigm B. And I was intellectual and studied psychology, philosophy, religion, spiritual practices, alchemy, all these different functions that get you to this level. And I lost interest in those processes, because it was like I used lots of different processes to get myself to it. And then what have I been doing since? Well, we came to the conclusion of this idea of paradigm B, and this just showed up. And then this idea of Lensafarianism came up, and it's just an extraordinarily, what seems like a very powerful way to look at the world. Yes, you can do all the ego work. You can follow all of these other spiritual plans, and there's gurus that are out there. But that's another thing that we're seeing is people are talking about the gurus going, well, I don't feel like I want to be a guru. I don't want to have a spiritual practice that I'm teaching and helping people along with. Basically, what this feels like is I'm just a participant, and I'm willing to moderate a discussion around ideas. And that's what I realized was when we started, Chelsea and I were discussing sensations. So Lensafarianism came from the idea that what came into creation, the very first thought that came into creation was, I want to come into creation. So it was a good sensation that we started recognizing there's lots of good sensations: happy, joy, sincerity, kindness, mischievousness. There's all these different elements, and they are tangible experiences. And so what's interesting is, as Lensafarians, we kind of have we understand what Lensafarian is basically an overlay, like any other spiritual practice, any other religion, any philosophy or psychology. It's like an overlay that takes your attention. And Lensafarianism says, okay, you can shift your perspective, and you can focus on, if life is the gift of experience, then focus on the good sensations, because that's what is interesting about enjoying the experience of being part of reality. And then you get to label it however you want. So meaning that, if it feels good to talk to God, talk to God. If it's spirit, if it's the universe, whatever your relationship is, as long as there's a good feeling. And that's the thing, is it doesn't matter what the wordage is. What we're trying to do and discover is talking to other people, because those good sensations are very tangible. And that was what was really interesting for me, was I wanted to get into, but what's the like when people would explain something to me, like esoteric or ethereal, I'm like, what am I going to feel? What am I going to experience? Because that's really, I'm limited with how I see the world. And like, there has to be data that I'm looking for in some way that's tangible, so that if I do have free will and I want to make a choice, I can make a choice based on something tangible. So what was interesting is we every day we look at a new sensation, and today's is enthusiasm, I believe. Is that correct, Chelsea? I got a head nod. And so it's like we start looking at that sensation, but what I recognize is, like, I'm not an expert on that sensation. And I have a connection with it. But what's interesting and entertaining, possibly for you watching and the people around us, has been telling stories and connecting the tangible experiences that we have together on what these good sensations are. And this is kind of a novel approach, because we are so focused and so popular in paradigm A to believe in right and wrong, and think that there's a religion or philosophy that's going to teach, like, what exactly I'm supposed to do as a human being. But we can process, like, you're here today, and we can process together. We're in the process of discovering this together. Like, what does this feel like? And it, like, what Lensafarianism has done for Chelsea and I is outrageous and amazing, like shifting our perspective of the past. And so Chelsea came up with this idea of, like, we're characters. We're all a perception of reality, playing a character in reality. So we can look at ourselves as the actor. We could then be the director. Or Chelsea came up with the idea that we can be the editor. And I'm just looking at this. I haven't looked through it, but it made a lot of sense because that's one of the things that Chelsea and I have practiced with Lensafarianism is when we go back to the past and revisit it, oftentimes we're bringing a negative connotation about a human being back with us. And what we do is we revisit it. So it's like we go back and we edit it so that we can see it. More importantly, it's not seeing it, it's experiencing it. So I just had a somebody from high school. I just found out that he passed. And I was kind of struggling with my personal interaction with this person because we had a falling out many decades ago, and ever since that falling out, I have not had a warmth and for this person, and that's something that I want to feel and experience for everybody, and not because it's the right thing to do. It's because it feels good to have that expression. And like that's the thing that I feel like I can give back. If I have that warm feeling about somebody, then every time that they come into my world, I can dip into that. And that's the thing that I give back to the world as an activator, is what we're calling it lately. And so on this walk that we had yesterday, I posed that to everybody and they started giving me feedback. Well, basically what it allowed me was to listen to the feedback, and that feedback was like just this beautiful mirror that came back to me and went, okay, I got it. Like, just gave me new perspective of who this character was, and all of a sudden I just felt this warmth because I relate to it, and I was just like, that feels good. I've got the warmth, and that's all I need. That's all I need. I don't need to do a lot of mental gymnastics to work on it. It's like that's what I was looking for, and that's what I'm always looking for, is just sit in those sensations. So, that was unexpected. Let's drop into today's idea. And what I'm doing with Lensafarian Cherch is not picking a topic when I schedule it, but like once it becomes clear, like this is the theme of experience, what we're experiencing. It's me and other people that are having these discussions, paradigm B kind of discussions, whether they call it paradigm B or not. That's how I would look at it. And the two themes were elsewhere and novelty. So elsewhere, and I'll go through both of these. Elsewhere is this idea, and this is kind of understanding, like from a broader perspective. So when I look at my childhood and what we were putting together in our collective agreements, the limitations on technology. We didn't have all these phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have internet when I was growing up. But then we had like science fiction, we had stories like Star Wars coming in. And so we had these ideas, but they were like so far off because our technology wasn't anywhere near what they were proposing in these ideas. So we are with this limited technology, and we're saying, okay, we've got all these things going on in the world. How do we want to collectively agree on things? And so in the United States, you can kind of just look over what we decided. There was a period of time after the World War that we said, okay, you're, if you get a good job, have a career, spend 30 years doing that, we'll do Social Security, we'll give you health care. That's your reward when you get there. And then you've got the rest of your life after retirement to do that. this isn't about whether you agree with that or not. What this is that was the here, there story. So, like, we're all dealing with time and we're making agreements on what we're all meant to do with our time. So, we decided that that was the here, there story. And we based it, and you can go over the decades and we can see how the here, there stories have changed. And you can see with the kerfluffles in that we're experiencing in the world now, the upheavals, we're having a collective, let's say, argument. Some are having the argument, some, like Chelsea and ourselves, are not really doing the argument thing, as to what the here, there story is. So what does elsewhere mean? That means, like, if you are in this argument, then it's like that's what this argument is about. Or you like, let's take the liberal way, let's take the conservative way, let's take capitalism, let's take socialism, let's become communist. Like, these become all the conversations, and that's basically saying, to get from here to there, we already have these pre-digested ideas, and I'm choosing this, and I'm going to scream, and I'm going to kick, and I'm going to give money, and I'm going to do all of this to get from this here to there. And so this opens up the idea for people that want to think outside the box of, we're going elsewhere. And maybe that all of these pre-digested ideas that have already been pre-digested, that there is some form of government, like we've already looked at all forms of government, and so we're proposing in Paradigm B that there are new ways of looking at the world and seeing the world, and those answers are elsewhere. So there's people that are not tied to all the pre-digested ideas and looking for something that's elsewhere, but it's like, what does elsewhere look like? And we're all kind of figuring it out. That's what Lensafarianism is. That's what Paradigm B is. That's what these conversations are about. Is as we start shifting into this new reality, like, what are we going to do? Like, what's up? What's going on? And that's kind of how this ties into novelty and this interest in novelty. All novelty means is new ideas. So Paradigm B is a novel approach to it that I knew of. But how it's defined, we're finding that. We're not sure. Lensafarianism is a novel approach to personal development and seeing and experiencing the world. So it's novel, it's new, but we're right in the middle of it. We're processing it. We're figuring it out. There's people that are interested in it because they're like, yeah, I don't like the other things that are going on, and this seems cool because, like, you guys are pointed towards having a good experience, and that might. That's what we're figuring, is that there might be people that are interested in enjoying the experience instead of fighting to have a good experience, which what Paradigm A is about, is the struggle, that we need to struggle in order to get change to happen. So novelty and elsewhere. So it's like, that's what we need to look at, is if we understand that we want change, because that's the thing, is that you're either waking up inspired to just always want new and novel things and fun things to do in the world, or you're waking up with depression and it, like, pushing up against what I would say Paradigm A and trying to fit in with Paradigm A, because that's what it is a bunch of egos fighting for what they believe to be right or wrong, or which beliefs are right, which ones are wrong. It's another way of, just coming to saying, okay, I want something different. And all you're doing when you say that is, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to try to look at the world in a different perspective. And in doing that, you're going to be challenging all the things that you're familiar with. So Chelsea and I were just having this conversation about catalyzing moments in our life. And I, was a very linear person. My here, there story was already made up by the blueprint that was written. I kind of had a sense that I wanted to be a teacher. And then I had this idea, I wanted to be young early. I wanted to have a career, the whole retirement, the family, by a certain age. And things didn't quite work out in that dream. So I switched it over to being a banker. But I had I had my group of friends. I had my trajectory that was going on. And then I had one interaction with some of my bosses, and from that decision I decided to quit banking and become a teacher. That led to me going to school, so now I'm already separated from the friend group that I was having a bit. And then I was like, in that I was inspired to get into shape, so I started going to the gym. I stopped I think I was trying to stop smoking, or maybe I did stop smoking at that time. And I was making all these shifts. Well, this was changing my life a lot, because I had made kind of all these agreements with the people around me, and then they're going, hey, you're changing, I'm going to need to do something else. And I was making those kind of things. So, but basically all I can look at is that at that time, all that it did was I was looking elsewhere for answers and to look at the world differently. And so can we do this? Like, do we do this? Can we be inspired to look elsewhere for direction, for entertainment, for musing? Like, how do we look for elsewhere? How do we look for novel ideas or new expressions and change in the world? And then when we do that, how are we going to do that? Because we could make the choice of changing our life. Like, I could say to myself, I will change my life completely, but am I going to do that gracefully? Or am I going to do that abruptly? Like, am I just going to just go, all the agreements that I've had with people, you guys are all done, and I'm going to move to another country and change my name, and I'm going to be a completely different spirit. So I'm just kind of playing the philosopher's perspective now, that there's just many different ways to look at it. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's any comments, or if Chelsea wanted to jump in and discuss. You over?
Oh, okay. I was going to maybe touch on the WISP idea, the whimsical, inspired, spiritual participation. And it's actually a borrowed idea from, I think, game theory. The WISP in game theory is used as the mechanism that goes between the material and the ethereal. And we kind of use the same overlay when we're talking about being in the zone of synchronicity, being in these more, you could say, mystical or magical mindsets, where we're not so rigid with the previous program. So we're allowing for the unknown, for that sense of elsewhere to come in. That gives us a new, whimsical, novel view of something completely new, or it could be something familiar that we're looking at it completely differently, which gives it a new feeling. So that's what I wanted to add with part of our practice.
WISP is your acronym for WISP is?
Whimsical, inspired, spiritual participation.
Okay, very good. Okay. That was a great, yeah, see, I love this, because it goes, this to me is improv. When I practiced improv, it was allowing me to be in that moment. So my process, um, when I used to act, I had people that would tell me, like, "You're just so brave to do this and courageous," and I'm like, "No, I was not. I was not born ready to be on stage." I remember I was absolutely terrified in my first communications class in college. I was just proud of myself. I was so robotic and tense doing it. And even the professor who gave me my score for giving a speech said, like, you just basically read off the page. And I was like, yeah, that was all I was capable of doing. I was so tense. So it took me many, many years of practicing, um, sitting with that uncomfortableness of the anxiety that would come up for being on stage and having all eyes on me, and a worry of messing it up and saying the wrong thing. Um, and there was a lot of practice with that because it would drive me bananas because I would be like, I don't even know why I'm getting nervous, but I was. And so it was changing it. And then I started doing things like, um, stop telling myself, self-talk was huge, and said, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. And that spun and gave me a different good feeling. There's a little Lensafarianism in there. So it's kind of like that's the tangible course. So was introduced to this just recently, this WISP idea, the whimsical inspired spiritual practice. How do we get into a space of being whimsical? Is like we have to understand that we're rigid. We have to figure out where we're emotionally blocked so that we can put our attention there, engage with that tension until it's loosened up, and then that looseness then can be experienced in the world. And that's the most beautiful thing. Before I did stand-up comedy, before I did improv comedy, and I remember I was just paranoid to do stand-up. To like, just I was so blinded with anxiety of standing up and trying to make people laugh and be funny. And I remember asking a guy before he got up on stage, and this is before improv, and I said, "Are you nervous?" And it was his first time doing stand-up. He goes, "Nah." He said, I've been doing improv forever, and if I mess up my line, if I mess up my set or whatever, I'll just go into improving." And I thought, "Oh my God, like that that is flexibility. That is whimsical in nature. That's being able to be a fairy in the moment of being light, meaning light and having a very easy and light touch on reality is like, okay, what will you be like in a moment?" And I used to be a person that would pre-digest everything, pre-digest, like if I was in this experience, what would I be like? And if I was in this experience, what would I be like? And then once you practice things like improv, it's like you just realize like you don't have to pre-digest life. You don't have to prepare yourself for every situation in the world. And you can become lighter. Flip it over.
Like children, be wiggly.
Be children, be wiggly. Okay, I'll just have to replace it. I just want to make sure that they're hearing on the sound. If you don't flip it over back and forth. Being wiggly like children, yes. And that was the interesting thing as we started in one of my troops, we would do improv jams where the audience could come and participate, and the kids were just amazing. Like they just went nuts. Um, they were amazing improvers, and it was the process of becoming an adult that had taken that whimsical nature away from them. And so it would be the teenagers, especially the young teenage girls, would just freeze, like absolute terror, like social freezing. It was so uncomfortable. I'm feeling their discomfort in this moment just thinking about it. So these are ways that we can explore elsewhere. And we can also look, and it's oftentimes we can get so wrapped up in our story. And that's one of the things that I noticed, that we're in this transition period in reality of shifting away from paradigm A into paradigm B. And a lot of people are just clinging on to A like nobody's business. But they're miserable, they're depressed, they're anxious, and they're just not ready to give up on it. Like, if I take my ADHD medicine, and if I finally get the chance to go out and work out and I get that motivation, I'll do it. And I'm suggesting to look elsewhere. That's if you're experiencing these kind of things, or if you feel like you're boxed into a situation, into who you think you are or what you're supposed to be doing here, is to just start to allow a little meditation on the idea that there's an elsewhere. Just even having a sticker. We don't have any stickers yet, but I'd like to get some stickers just to remind you that oftentimes that's the thing, is that you realize, like, you've done this a million times, where and Einstein talked about this. Like, if he ran up into a block in a decision, like, or in a problem, he would leave the problem altogether. The problem was solvent, but it was in the process of trying to solve it with his mind, he would be blocked. And that's more of what we need, because a lot of times everything is scripted in paradigm A. I mean, I was just talking about, like, the Council of Gender. I was just kind of poking at the argument that we've had over decades of what a woman should be like, how women should go back to being the way they used to be, or men being the way they should be, or men being toxic, or toxic masculinity. And it's like there's just this raging idea that if you're part of this group, if I'm a man, then I need to be like trying to figure out what all men should do. But there comes a time where here's another point of view that's elsewhere for a lot of people, is you can zoom out to everybody's just human, and you don't have to sit there and worry about what gender somebody is. You can look at them as a human being, to see that all these things would happen if you looked at it from a broader perspective. I was thinking that that's a good idea of paradigm B. Moving to that is that you begin to expand your perspective, and you're able to be like, okay, I'm caught in this problem. So I kind of had this thing come up about the buddy passing, dying, crossing back over, and then I was just like, that's not the feeling experience I wanted. And then I proposed it to this group of people, re-lensified it, and I'm like, yeah, I like that. That feels good. Okay, good. And that's what I feel like I give back to the world now. It's like, if I'm feeling good, I'm resonating. And it's funny to tell you these kind of things, because I used to be like, that was probably my last gasp thing, and Chelsea's sitting here smiling really big, and it was funny because I started to speak vibrations and frequency, and then we'd still be in a kerfluffle, and I'm like, but I'm talking in your language now. But it's now I understand, and it makes me feel light, because now I feel like I'm doing something. Like before, it was like when I learned, here's an example of that, when I learned about compassion, it felt like, and you see this in paradigm A, it's like, it's just pity. Like, oh, those poor people going through that, or those poor people going through that. And that's not the way that I see it. It's not that they're not in pain. It's, what is my response to that pain going to be? And it seemed like what people were saying is, pity them. Send your concern their way. I'm like, that doesn't seem like I'm doing any good. It does if I stay in paradigm A and I don't evolve, and humans don't evolve. But once you recognize that everything's frequency and energy, you start to realize that you can change frequencies and energies, and there's ones that you want to be a part of, and there's ones that you don't. So it's like when people talk about bad things that happen, my reception of that is different because I've processed and engaged with those emotions, the grief within myself, and I have a different relationship with those things. Um, where was I? Or where should I go?
Following your thread with changing frequencies and how it's the smorgasbord of our choice. We could decide. So I was kind of following that.
Oh, very good. Yeah, you were kind of following the thoughts. Yeah, we can change our frequencies. And now that I'm getting more in tune with that, I still want to know what that tangible experience is. And I can tell. Like, I know, like, the minute that I reframed my high school friend, like, my heart just came online, and I'm feeling warmth and experiencing love, what I would expect, or what how I would define love. I'm experiencing that. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to feel. That's what I want to feel when it comes to everything, is being able to re-lensify it and look at it. You had brought something up earlier. Oh, friendly. So Chelsea came up with the idea of having a friendly relationship with everything.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a big that's a big rabbit hole to go down. But I love it. It's something to put into the toolbox when we start talking about elsewhere is
Mm-hmm. I can talk a little bit about.
Please flip over and
Hello. The aspect of where in my in within my psyche, um, approaching it like my interior landscape, um, trying to do this integration, and it was coming from the integration of like making a friendly field then for my playing with the dark side of myself, allowing some of the negative perceived things about myself to be able to come into this scape, this friendly scape where then I could have a better communication with it, understanding with it, and where all the parts of myself could come together and and not be, slinging arrows at each other. So there's when for me it was like I had things within myself that were at odds with each other. These were contradicting ideas, beliefs that didn't that didn't have coherence with each other, and so this turmoil. So these are the parts of things of finding out within ourselves what's coherent, what's not, and I wanted a friendly field in which all of these aspects of myself could be in a good, interconnected, healthy space with each other. So that's what I wanted to share with that.
lovely. So yeah, what I was relating with you and my personal life, I'm a big anecdote person, was because it's experience, it's tangible experience. When I look at that, it was depression. Ugh, like that was. I recognized, and it's interesting because I recognized from talking to, as soon as you have a thing, you start to find the people that like to talk about the thing. Depression was one of them. So when I would talk about, I wanted to talk about depression just in that I wanted to people to understand that I understand what depression's like, and I understood that I would never even go to a counselor or somebody who has not experienced depression. Like, you don't know what it is until you experience it. But I thought I went through one little stage of it, and then I went through another stage of my life, and then I thought, oh, like, when I'm spiritually awake, no more depression. And that was not the case. I continued to experience depression, and I could identify it, I can describe it, I can. But what I started to do was to start to refocus it, because what I found was, as soon as you start to have something and you start to identify with it, you start to look at it as this bad monster, and then you make it personal. And it's like, well, they don't understand because they don't have to go through the thing that I'm going through. And so there was this kind of this give and take within myself, was the giving to let people know that I've experienced depression, and let me look at it. I can look at it, and these are the things that help me with it. What can you do? And maybe that can be helpful. But I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to make it the conversation piece. And what I recognized that I had done after a long time was created a friendly relationship. The self-talk inside my head wasn't, I'm doing this again and I got to trudge through this. And it was like, that was a down-ticking relationship that I had with it. I figured out that that's how reality works, is the more, like, if we think about like the overlay. So when I'm doing this, I'm like thinking of myself like in one of those big glass bubbles. And the overlay are like, so I'm looking at it visually. The overlay is how I look at it. And so if I have this relationship with depression, which I did, where it was this down-ticking relationship, like, I don't want to do this, and this is not fair, and whatever else. Well, it just made depression more difficult, because I had I'm fighting it. I have an unfriendly, going to Chelsea's new language, I'm fighting it. So what I recognized is that we can change the perspective on things, which meant that I needed, I had to seed myself, and that's what I'm saying with this, with my lens. I've got this, like, I don't know why I have this, but visually I have this. I recognized that I had a down-ticking perspective, so I changed it. So we'll just move it over here, and we'll say, we got to find a different perspective. And if I can't have up-ticking, I at least want neutral. So I don't have to make any kind of subjective value judgment on it. It was like, just, I would recognize the depression coming in. I can feel the cells in my body. It feels like I have little, I have visuals. It was like little frowny faces. I could feel like my cells in my body just like depressed. And it was like I wanted to just get to that point where the cells were at least neutral, because then I can make them smile. So one of the biggest things that I did was started creating a friendly relationship with I just recognize it coming on. Okay, I have no excuses. If I don't get out and walk, or get out and exercise, if I don't eat right, if I don't have a positive perspective, if I don't maintain those things, I've got no excuses. Like, I know that those things will help me get through it. And that's what ended up happening. It just became I made a friendly relationship with it, and I'm lucky that I haven't experienced much depression over the last couple of years. And I have a feeling that it has a lot to do with having a much more friendly relationship with my depression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share? Okay. So, yeah, let's kind of just recap. So, elsewhere. Yeah. That's all we're doing with my t-shirt, elsewhere, talking about elsewhere, looking at the idea, because sometimes we forget. that no matter what, like we're dealing with chronological time, we're moving from here to there in some way, and in some manner we're going, like, what we want to, where we're at now and what we want to experience is here, and what we want to experience is there. And there's some relationship between it, because if I want to eat, I need to go to the store to make sure that I have groceries. So to get myself to knowing that in like about an hour I'm going to be breaking my fast and wanting something to eat, so I'm going to have to be talking about here to there in some kind of manner. But the idea of just having elsewhere is like open, and having friends and people who like to talk about these kind of things. This is maybe somebody, you guys, this is looking for elsewhere. Like, where are you finding these other things? These other ideas that are coming in, especially as this new world is being birthed and we're entering that new world. It's like, what's everybody finding? And what's interesting is, I had these feelings, and I was like, oh, but I didn't really say anything, and I didn't do anything. I never made a video about it. And then all of a sudden I see somebody make a video about it, and I'm like, wait, that was mine. I had that idea like a year ago, and now somebody else is talking about it. It's like we're all just creating and putting all of this together. In fact, we just saw this morning as we were about to put this together, we had done a bunch of research about Paradigm B and it having an exclusive name, and now we just saw that somebody has Paradigm B, and it's similar to what we're doing.
In Canada.
And so it's kind of the same thing with Lensafarianism. There's probably other people that are discussing this process, because elsewhere exists all the time. It's just like we have to be in the space to allow it to come in. And that's that idea of seeking novelty and being okay with the fact that that there's new things coming in that we get to experience, and it's the excitement of the novel. And that's probably why a lot of people are bored, because they're trapped in one paradigm trying to to be entertained. And it's like there's other ways to look at the world, and as soon as you start expanding it, these novel ideas, these new ideas come in, and then that creates a whole nother pattern of recognition of, like, oh wow, and I start to awaken. But oftentimes we have to change our lives a little bit in order to do that. So it can be simply, there's lots of things that I've changed my, like I hated coffee when I started. I was just like, coffee people, blah blah blah. It's like now I have coffee almost every morning. Avocados, that was one I was talking about. And it's like, what's available? Avocados, meaning that I didn't like avocados, and I had a ew. And then all of a sudden I started changing my relationship with it, and then it became like, oh my God, that was amazing avocado. I had one in Peru. Yes, you're about to say something.
Well, I just wanted to add that about elsewhere, as there's a lot of talk of be here now, being in the present moment, and elsewhere is another way of that in itself. It's being present. So
elsewhere, being present. I don't know if you can hear Chelsea when it's on my mic. So being present, yeah, elsewhere. Yes. Yeah, that's a very good point. It's like being stuck in our anxiety, and the here-there story is difficult to see through that. So yeah, we need to pull back into now, get as present as we can, and that's tangible. Like, that's the interesting thing about now, is it's tangible, because I now I've worked with my mind so much, it's like I can just shut my mind down. If I'm feeling anxiety or something, I want to experience something else, I can just take a few breaths, and my mind is clear, and I don't have thoughts racing, and that's what I would describe as now. And then it's like, yeah, and then something new and novel can appear, and that is obviously elsewhere from the period. So if I'm in a crazy mind, the answer might be right here, but I can't see it because my mind is crazy. So as I work with my emotional guidance system, that brings now elsewhere is now available. So we have kind of a relationship with it. And it's like, and we have talks. That's Chelsea and I. That's what we talk about is elsewhere, and finding different ways to look at the world. And we're constantly trying out new novel approaches to how we're perceiving and seeing current situation, the situation where we want to see ourselves in. Um, yeah, and it's playful and fun. It's wispy. It's wispy, whimsical, inspired spiritual practice. I love that. It's just light saying it. So, if you like these kind of things, like, share, and subscribe. Whatever your flavor is and whatever you're doing, I wish you well. I really do, and I know Chelsea wishes you well as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Have a great Sunday. Be well. Was anybody on?
One other person came on at one point and stayed for several minutes.